GoForThe2.com. These are my Week 13 predictions for the college football season, and what can you ask for? We have Thanksgiving week. We have games on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and as a college football fan, what can you ask for but turkey and football? I'm going to have all the predictions for all the week up on the website Tuesday morning. I already have the Akron-Toledo prediction up on the website under the NCAA pick section at GoForThe2.com. You could check that out right now, but I'll have the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday predictions all up on the website under the NCAA pick section, so check that out. That'll be up tomorrow morning. I'm just going to get into a little bit the number one and number two teams in the country. It was a great weekend of college football. We had number one Kansas State and number two Oregon getting knocked off, which now allows Notre Dame to sit at the top spot. It's the first time since 1993 that the Fighting Irish are number one in the country. They play USC this week. USC without its starting quarterback, Matt Barkley. He's out for this game. Freshman quarterback Max Wittek will take over at the helm. He's making his first career start. We're not really going to talk much about that game because of Matt Barkley's injury. I'll have a preview, though, for that game on a separate podcast. You could check that out at GoForThe2.com or check out my YouTube channel for that preview. Number two, Alabama. What can you say about the Crimson Tide? They're back in the national championship hunt. 1 week removed from the Texas A&M loss at home. Alabama's got an inside track to get back to the national championship game, and the SEC has an inside track to send a possible 7th straight member to the national championship game. SEC's won 6 straight. They have Alabama sitting at number 2, Georgia sitting at number 3, and Florida sitting at number 4. So that's 3 straight SEC teams behind Notre Dame. Should Alabama beat Auburn, they will face Georgia in the SEC championship game, and the winner of that bowl game will move on to the BCS national championship game against Notre Dame at this point, or should USC knock off Notre Dame, which I don't think will happen, another member of possibly the SEC in the national championship game. So keep an eye out for that. Alabama and Georgia play in the SEC championship game if Alabama beats Auburn this weekend. So keep an eye out for that. Let's talk about Florida State quickly. Jeff Driscoll, they're sitting at number 4, Florida. They need to beat in-state rival Florida State and then get some help. They need Georgia Tech to knock off Georgia, and then they might jump to a couple of spots should Georgia beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. That's how Florida could get to the BCS title, but they need a lot of help at this point. And Jeff Driscoll's out, considered out for the Florida State game. He's out / uncertain for this ball game, so not a lot of word about his injury, but we'll have to see how the week develops. We're not going to talk much about that because of Jeff Driscoll's injury about the Florida State game. Let's get right into the predictions for this weekend. Let's take the Bedlam rivalry. Oklahoma State traveling to Norman, Oklahoma to take on Bob Stoops and the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma did pick up a 50-49 victory last week in Morgantown. Oklahoma State playing very well as of late. They knocked off West Virginia. They knocked off Texas Tech over the last couple of games, and they travel on the road to Norman, where they've lost 4 straight games by an average of 33.1 points per game in those 4 losses. So that's something to keep an eye out for Oklahoma State. When you look at Oklahoma State, though, on the season, this is only their 4th road game. When you look at their road games this year, they haven't performed very well. They lost on the road to Arizona. They lost on the road against Kansas State, and then they struggled on the road against Kansas. They did beat Kansas, but it was a very close game, 20-14. So Oklahoma State really hasn't performed very well on the road. When you look at their statistics on the road, they're -10 in turnover margin on the road. They're giving up defensively 186 yards rushing on the road and 273 yards passing on the road. And now they go up against Landry Jones in that offense. I know Oklahoma hasn't fared very well at home. They did drop 2 games, both of their losses came at home, but both of those losses were to Kansas State and Notre Dame, top 5 opponents. So I like Oklahoma in this game. I think they pick up a 55-28 dominating victory over the Cowboys. I know Oklahoma State's moving the football, but they've had quarterback issues in terms of injuries. Clint Shelf is the quarterback now. He's performing well, but prior to that, it was J.W. Walsh, and prior to that, it was Wes Lunt. They've had a lot of injuries at the quarterback position, and now Clint Shelf is back at the helm. He's on the road against Oklahoma, and I like Oklahoma's offense in this spot. I think Oklahoma picks up a dominating home victory, 55-28, over their in-state rivals, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma hasn't lost back-to-back games since 2001 and 2002. So keep that in mind in the series. So keep that in mind as well. Oklahoma State not performing well on the road, and Oklahoma hasn't lost back-to-back games to Oklahoma State since 2001 and 2002. I think they get a dominating victory, the Sooners do, and Landry Jones and that offense seem to be gelling, and I think they pick up a dominating 55-28 victory at home over Oklahoma State. Virginia traveling to Blacksburg to take on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech sitting at 5-6 on the season. They're coming off a very mediocre performance on the road last week against Boston College. They picked up a 30-23 victory over the Eagles in Chestnut Hill. And when you look at the Hokies, who would have thought in this game, coming into the last game of the season, that Virginia Tech would have 6 losses on the season? Who would have thought that the Virginia Tech Hokies defense would not be a top 20 defense under Bud Foster this year? They've statistically been blown out and given up a ton of yards, both rushing and passing. And when you look at their offense in terms of Logan Thomas, he was a top 50 NFL draft pick, a potential draft pick heading into the season. He's lucky to be drafted at this point. I know he's big, but I don't like his decision making. I like the offense of Virginia, the way they're performing as of late. When you look at Virginia, they're coming off a loss to North Carolina at home, but they do have playmakers on offense. I expect Philip Sims, which was the Alabama transfer. He transferred a couple of years ago under Nick Saban. He was the backup to A.J. McCarron. He's seen some action as of late, and he's performed. Philip Sims is a very good quarterback, and Michael Rocco is on his way out to losing the starting job. So I think you'll see head coach Mike London use more of Philip Sims in this ball game. He's a playmaker and can cause some problems for the Hokie defense. When you look at Virginia, they're able to run the ball. They have 2 very good running backs in Kevin Parks and Perry Jones, and I think you have to throw statistics out of the window. This is a rivalry game, and I like Virginia's chances. I think they pick up a 28-21 victory and knock off Virginia Tech at home. I think just a lot of people think because Virginia Tech is at home, they get the victory. I don't think that's the case. They're really a mediocre ball club, and I like the Cavaliers in this ball game to win 28-21. Let's talk about another rivalry game, Oregon and Oregon State in the Civil War. Oregon losing at home in overtime to Stanford to knock out their chances for the BCS title. They now travel on the road to face a very good Oregon State Beaver team who's sitting at 8-2. Oregon State's very disciplined. They're able to run the football. They were able to get 559 yards last week against Cal. Their starting quarterback a couple weeks ago, at that time, Cody Vaz, he got hurt in the 27-23 loss to Stanford. Sean Mannion, who was the starter at the start of the season last week, threw 4 touchdowns. And I just think that psychologically for the Ducks to come off the home loss to Stanford, their national championship hopes dismantled by the Cardinal. I like Oregon State in this ball game, and I also think that Mariota, redshirt freshman quarterback for the Ducks, is on the road. That scares me. I like the Beavers in this ball game to pick up a 33-30 home victory and give Chip Kelly and the Ducks a second straight loss. Let's talk about Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State, they're undefeated under Urban Meyer. They're coming off a overtime victory on the road in Madison, Wisconsin. They knocked off the Badgers last week. They're performing very well. Braxton Miller, a Heisman Trophy candidate, he's basically 80% of that offense. But when you look at this game a little bit more in detail, I like Michigan in this ball game. I like what Devin Gardner's done after Denard Robinson's injury. I think the Michigan Wolverines are a better offensive team with Devin Gardner at the helm than Denard Robinson. I think Denard Robinson forces the ball sometimes into coverage. I think Michigan understands what they are now with Devin Gardner at quarterback. Whether Denard Robinson plays or not, he's seen sporadic action running the football. But I like Michigan on the road in this ball game. I think they knock off Ohio State in this ball game. Michigan's defense only giving up 134 yards rushing on the road. I like the defense of Michigan in this ball game. I think Michigan picks up a 21-17 victory over Ohio State and knocks Ohio State out of the ranks of the unbeaten. Ohio State trying to be like the 1993 Auburn Tiger team led by Terry Bowden. They were on probation that year and they won out. They were undefeated, the hypothetical national champion in 1993 because they were undefeated. But I think Michigan knocks off their rival this year. They beat Braxton Miller last year at home. I think the defense steps up, makes plays, and I like Michigan in this ball game, 21-17 over Ohio State. Let's talk about two more teams, Clemson and South Carolina. Clemson at home facing their in-state rival, SEC opponent, and Steve Spurrier, South Carolina. In my estimation, two teams playing different styles of football. Up-tempo in Clemson, they've been actually outscoring opponents. They're number 4 in the nation in terms of scoring offense. They're averaging 44 points per game. They're led by a great quarterback in Taj Boyd, a great running back in Andre Ellington, and they have very good wideouts. Sammy Watkins and Hopkins are two of the top wide receivers in the country. They can score at will at anybody. But when you look at South Carolina in this ball game over the last 3 games, they've been hurt. Marcus Lattimore 3 weeks ago went down against Tennessee. Since that time, South Carolina struggled offensively. When you look at their last 3 games, South Carolina struggled last week against Wofford. They won 24-7. A couple of weeks ago, they struggled against Arkansas, a mediocre Arkansas team. They did win 38-20, but they struggled in that ball game. And then 3 weeks ago, when Lattimore went down, they were winning dominant, but then when he went down, they struggled and they got a 38-35 victory over Tennessee. Their body of work over the last three weeks isn't that impressive. Also, I don't like Connor Shaw on the road. He struggled on the road this year, and I think that when you look at South Carolina, Jadeveon Clowney's nicked up. Bruce Ellington, the wide receiver's a little bit banged up, and I think that the lack of offensive weapons heading into this ball game spells trouble for Steve Spurrier. And the Gamecocks, they do have the better defense, but offensively, they don't have the firepower to keep up with Clemson. I like Clemson and Dabo Swinney in this ball game. I think they knock off their rival. I think they move to 11-1 on the season. I like Clemson to pick up a 38-24 victory over South Carolina. One more team, Louisville and UConn. Louisville a couple of weeks ago came off a dominating road loss to Syracuse. They got blown out in the Carrier Dome. They were undefeated at that point. They were 9-0. They went on the road and they got blown out by the Orange and head coach Doug Marrone. They've had a week off to think about that ball game. They're 9-1. They need to win their next 2 games against UConn and then against Rutgers, and Louisville will be in the BCS game for the Big East champion. So I think they'll be motivated for this ball game. I think that head coach Charlie Strong is in my estimation, a Coach of the Year candidate as well. He's turned around that program, and you're going to hear Charlie Strong being mentioned with a lot of these coaching vacancies within this year. Personally, I think he's a front runner, whether he goes or not, but look for the University of Tennessee to lure head coach Charlie Strong to that program. I know he has ties to Arkansas, but look for Tennessee to lure Charlie Strong. He was the former defensive coordinator for the Gators. He has ties to Florida and the SEC, and I think that would be a good fit for head coach Charlie Strong and the Tennessee Volunteer Nation. But he's a very underrated coach. He's a good coach. He gets his team prepared week in and week out. He has a very good offense led by Teddy Bridgewater, the quarterback. He's only a sophomore, but Teddy Bridgewater is a star. When you look at what he's done this year, Louisville's averaging 312 yards passing at home. They're going up against a team in UConn, which is mediocre. They've underperformed under Paul Pasqualoni, the former Syracuse head coach. He took over for Randy Edsall. He looks in over his head at the UConn Husky position. When you look at UConn, before last week's victory against Pittsburgh, they did not score a second half point since September 29th. They've struggled offensively in terms of scoring points per game. They only are averaging 18 points per game offensively, and on the road, they're only averaging 67 yards rushing on the road as an offense. That makes them one-dimensional. I think Louisville will be able to dominate this ball game. They have a very senior offensive line. Their center, Mario Benavides, he's a great center, and that offensive line is very physical, and I think they wear down UConn. I think Louisville picks up a 35-10 victory over the Huskies, and they move on against that Big East game against Rutgers 2 weeks from now. That'll be the winner of that ball game will be headed to the BCS for the Big East champion, the Orange Bowl. So keep an eye out for that. The Rutgers Louisville game is a must-see game if you're a Big East fan and you want to see who's going to be headed to the Orange Bowl. So keep an eye out for that. So those are the picks for this week, this Saturday. All the week's picks will be up on the website at goforthe2.com. Want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Eat, drink, be merry, enjoy. College football is the best, and we'll see you in week 14. Enjoy the weekend.